He was just a child when the world asked him to become a man, not because he wanted to, not because he was ready, but because life showed him no mercy. In a narrow street at the edge of the city stood a small, broken house, walls, cracked roof, leaking windows, always closed. Inside that house lived Ethan and his mother. To the world, they were invisible. To life, they were an easy target. Ethan was only 9 years old when his childhood ended. Every morning, before the sun rose, Ethan would wake up to the sound of coughing. It was the same sound every day, deep, painful, and frightening. He would jump out of bed, his small feet touching the cold floor, and rush to his mother's side. "Mom, Mom, breathe slowly," he would whisper, holding her trembling hand. Mariam's face was pale, her eyes tired, her body weak. Illness had wrapped itself around her life like a chain she could never break. Doctors said she needed rest, medicine, and care, things that cost money they didn't have. Ethan didn't understand medical words, but he understood one thing clearly: if he didn't take care of his mother, no one would. A father who never came back. Once upon a time, there was a father in that house. Ethan remembered him like a fading shadow, loud footsteps, angry words, and a door slamming shut. One rainy night, his father left, promising to return with money and answers. He never did. Days turned into months, months into years. Mariam stopped asking. Ethan stopped waiting. At 9 years old, Ethan learned the meaning of silence, the kind that screams louder than words. The weight on small shoulders. School was once Ethan's favorite place. He loved books, especially stories about heroes, boys who saved the world with courage and strength. But heroes in books didn't worry about rent. They didn't choose between food and medicine. They didn't hear their mother cry quietly at night, thinking her child was asleep. One morning, Mariam held Ethan's school bag in her hands, her fingers shaking. "Ethan, maybe you should stay home today," she said softly. Ethan looked at her. He saw the fear behind her smile. "It's okay, Mom," he replied. "I'll go later." But later never came. That was the last day Ethan wore his school uniform. A child becomes a provider. Ethan started working wherever he could. He cleaned shops, carried groceries, collected scrap from the streets. His hands grew rough. His knees stayed bruised. His heart grew tired. Every coin he earned went into one place, his mother's hand. Some days he came home with bread. Some days only with hope. And some days with nothing at all. When there was no food, Ethan would lie. "I ate already," he would say, smiling. "I'm not hungry." Mariam knew the truth, but she pretended to believe him. Because a mother's heart breaks differently. Saving his mother. Every single day Ethan didn't save his mother once. He saved her every day. He saved her by waking up before dawn. He saved her by skipping meals. He saved her by carrying responsibilities too heavy for his age. He saved her by being strong when he was scared. When Mariam collapsed one afternoon, Ethan ran barefoot through the street, screaming for help. People stared. Some ignored him. One old man followed. That day Ethan learned another lesson. Sometimes, saving someone means begging the world to care. A promise made in tears. That night, Mariam held Ethan close, her voice weak. "You shouldn't have to live like this," she whispered. "You're just a child." Ethan rested his head on her chest, listening to her heartbeats, low, tired, but still alive. "I don't care," he said softly. "As long as you're here, I'll do everything." Mariam cried silently because she knew her son was paying the price for her survival. Ethan learned hunger the way other children learned games, not all at once, slowly, quietly, until it became normal. Some mornings, there was nothing in the house but a half-empty bottle of water and yesterday's silence. Ethan would sit beside his mother's bed, watching her sleep, counting her breaths like numbers in a prayer. 1, 2, 3. As long as she was breathing, the day was worth fighting. The taste of nothing. Hunger didn't hurt at first. It just whispered. But after days, started shouting. Ethan felt it while walking the streets, while lifting heavy bags, while standing outside shops hoping someone would need help. His stomach twisted, his vision blurred. But he kept smiling because smiling made people kinder. Sometimes once, a bakery owner threw leftover bread into the trash. Ethan waited until the man went inside, then quietly pulled it out. It was hard, cold, covered in dust. He brushed it with his sleeve. "This is still good," he whispered to himself that night. He broke the bread into 2 pieces. He gave the bigger one to his mother. Mariam noticed everything: the way Ethan's clothes hung loosely on his body, the way his eyes had grown too serious, the way he flinched when she coughed, afraid she might not recover. One evening, she touched his face gently. "You're thinner," she said. Ethan shrugged. "I'm growing," she smiled, but her eyes filled with tears. "No," she thought. "You're disappearing." That night, when Ethan fell asleep on the floor beside her bed, Mariam cried into her pillow. Her illness had taken her strength, her dignity, and now it was taking her son's childhood. She wished she could give him more than love. But love doesn't pay bills. The city was cruel to children like Ethan. People stepped over him, looked through him, forgot him. One afternoon, while collecting scrap metal, a group of older boys surrounded him. "This is our area," one of them said, pushing Ethan hard. Ethan fell, scraping his hands and knees. The metal scattered across the road. I just need a little, Ethan whispered. The boys laughed. One kicked his bag away. Another slapped him. Ethan didn't cry. He picked up his bag, holding back pain and pride, and walked away. He had learned something important. Tears didn't change anything, only endurance did. Sometimes, Ethan passed by a school on his way home. He would stop and watch children run across the playground, their laughter loud and careless. A teacher called out names. A bell rang for a moment. Ethan imagined himself there holding books, raising his hand, dreaming of a future. Then his mother's face appeared in his mind. The dream faded. Ethan turned away. One winter night, the cold was sharper than usual. Miriam's breathing became shallow. Her skin burned with fever. Ethan sat beside her, shaking her gently. Mom, wake up, please. No answer. Fear wrapped around his chest like iron. Ethan ran, barefoot, in the dark, through empty streets. He knocked on doors. He begged. He cried out names of people who barely knew him. Most doors stayed closed. Finally, a woman opened hers when she saw Ethan's face pale, desperate. Shaking, she didn't ask questions. She helped. That night, Mariam survived. That night, Ethan learned another truth. Survival often depends on strangers. A child's silent prayer. After that night, Ethan stopped dreaming of toys or games. His prayers changed. Please don't take her, he whispered before sleep. Take my hunger, take my tiredness, just let her stay. He believed sacrifices worked because every day he gave something up, and every day his mother woke up alive. The weight of responsibility. Ethan began working longer hours. He learned which shops were kinder, which streets were safer, which faces to avoid. His hands cracked in winter. His back ached like an old man's. But every evening, when he returned home and saw his mother smile weakly at him, it felt worth it. You're my hero, Mariam once said softly. Ethan didn't answer. Heroes were strong. He felt broken. One night, while eating thin soup, Ethan asked quietly, Mom, if you get better, will things change? Mariam looked at him for a long time. I don't know, she said honestly. Ethan nodded. Some questions didn't have answers. Fear had always lived with Ethan, not the loud kind. The quiet kind that sits in your chest and reminds you how easily everything can disappear. But one day, fear changed. And that day changed Ethan forever. Mariam's condition grew worse. The medicine Ethan managed to buy helped for a while, then stopped working. Her cough deepened. Her strength faded faster than before. Some mornings, she couldn't even sit up. Ethan watched helplessly as the woman who once carried him in her arms now struggled to lift a glass of water. Doctors spoke in low voices. They used words like chronic complications, long-term. Ethan didn't understand the words. He understood the tone. It was the tone of there is not much time. One evening, Ethan counted the coins in his pocket again and again. It wasn't enough. Not for medicine. Not for food. Not for hope. His hands shook as he sat beside his mother. I'll fix this, he whispered. I promise. Mariam looked at him with weak eyes. You don't have to save me every day, she said. You deserve a life too. Ethan looked away. Saving her was his life. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He followed a group of men to a construction site at the edge of the city. He stood quietly, watching, waiting. When one man noticed him, he waved him away. Too small, the man said. Ethan didn't move. I can work, he said. I don't need much. The man hesitated. By sunset, Ethan's hands were bleeding. He carried bricks heavier than his body. Dust filled his lungs. Pain screamed through his arms. But when the man dropped a few coins into his hand, Ethan felt something stronger than pain. Relief. That night, he came home barely able to stand. Mariam saw his hands. What did you do? She asked, panic rising in her voice. Nothing, Ethan lied, hiding his palms behind his back. Mothers always know, she cried. Weeks passed. Ethan worked days and nights. He ate less, slept less. He pushed himself beyond limits a child should never reach. Then one afternoon, under the burning sun, Ethan collapsed. The world went dark. For the first time, the boy who saved his mother every day needed saving himself. When he woke up, he was lying on a wooden bench. A stranger stood nearby holding water. You're just a kid, the man said softly. This will kill you. Ethan sat up slowly. If I stopped, he said, she won't live. The man had no answer. A mother's breaking point. When Ethan didn't come home that night, Mariam panicked. Her weak body forced itself out of bed. She waited by the door, every second heavier than the last. When Ethan finally stumbled in, pale and shaking, she broke. She held his face in her hands and cried like she hadn't cried in years. I would rather die, she said through tears, than watch you destroy yourself for me. Ethan felt something crack inside him. I can't lose you, he whispered. For the first time, neither of them had strength left. The next morning, Ethan went to the hospital alone. He stood in long lines. He spoke to people who barely listened. He asked questions he didn't know how to ask. Finally, a nurse looked at him closely. How old are you? She asked. Ethan hesitated. 9. Her face changed. That day, something unexpected happened. People helped, not because Ethan was strong, but because he was small. Forms were filled. A charity was contacted. Mariam was admitted under emergency care. As they took her inside, Mariam reached for Ethan's hand. "You saved me again," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "I was just not afraid anymore." That night, Ethan slept on the hospital floor, cold, hungry, exhausted, but for the first time in months, his heart was calm. Machines beeped softly in the room where his mother rested. Doctors moved in and out. The future was still uncertain, but she was alive, and that was enough. Ethan stared at the ceiling and thought, "I am not strong because I don't feel pain. I am strong because I feel a hand keep going." He closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be hard again, but tonight he had one. Hospitals had a different kind of silence, not the peaceful kind, the waiting kind. Ethan learned that silence while sitting on the cold floor outside his mother's room, knees pulled to his chest, eyes fixed on a door that decided everything. Inside that room, Mariam was fighting the hardest battle of her life, and outside, a child was learning how it feels to be powerless. The doctors spoke carefully. "She needs long-term treatment," one said. "Medicine, rest, follow-ups." Ethan nodded like he understood. Then came the words that mattered most. "There's help available, but it won't be easy. Charity support, limited aid, temporary relief, hope with conditions attached." Ethan thanked him again and again, his voice breaking with gratitude. He wanted to hug every nurse, every doctor, every stranger who didn't turn away for the first time. It felt like the world had noticed them. Mariam improved slowly, not fully, not strongly, but enough to smile again. Ethan sat beside her bed, telling her stories from the street, small victories, kind strangers, silly moments he exaggerated just to hear her laugh. "You should be a storyteller," she teased weakly. Ethan smiled. "I already am," he said. "I tell stories to keep you here." Mariam looked at him for a long time. She knew something he didn't. Late at night, when Ethan slept curled on a chair, Mariam stared at the ceiling. She didn't fear death. She feared leaving him alone. Who would wake him in the morning? Who would tell him he was more than his suffering? Who would remind him that he was still a child? Her heart ached with a pain no medicine could touch. A mother's fear is never for herself. One evening, Mariam called Ethan closer. "Come here," she whispered. Ethan held her hand tightly. If I get tired again," she said slowly, "promise me something." Ethan shook his head. "Don't say that." She smiled gently. "Promise me you'll live," she said. "Not just survive. Live." Ethan felt tears rise. "I don't know how," he said honestly. Mariam squeezed his hand. "You already do," she replied. "You just don't see it yet." It happened quietly. No dramatic moment, no warning. Just a sudden rush of nurses, doctors moving faster than before. A sound that didn't stop. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway. His small body pressed against the wall, heart beating so loudly he thought everyone could hear it. Minutes felt like years. Finally, a doctor came out. He knelt down to Ethan's level. "She's resting now," he said gently. "We're doing everything we can." Ethan nodded. He had learned to understand gentle voices. Mariam woke briefly that night. Her eyes searched the room until they found Ethan. "You're here," she whispered. "Always," Ethan replied, trying to smile. She lifted her hand weakly and touched his face. "You saved me every day," she said. Ethan shook his head, tears falling freely now. "No," he cried softly. "You saved me first." Mariam closed her eyes, a peaceful expression on her face. That was the last time Ethan heard her voice. When the sun rose, the room felt emptier, too quiet, too still. A nurse sat beside Ethan and held his hand. "I'm sorry," she said. The words didn't make sense at first, then they did. Ethan didn't scream, didn't run, didn't fall. He just sat there, because sometimes grief is too heavy to move. A child alone in the world. The house felt different without Mariam. Bigger, colder, louder in its silence. Ethan lay on the floor where he used to sleep beside her bed. He stared at the ceiling, counting cracks instead of breaths. For the first time since he could remember. No one needed saving. And that hurt more than hunger ever had. Days passed. People came and went. Food appeared. Voices offered comfort. But at night, it was just Ethan and the echo of his mother's words. "Promise me you'll live." He didn't know how, but he knew he had to try, because that was the last thing she asked of him. Grief doesn't arrive like a storm. It settles like dust, quiet, everywhere, impossible to escape. Ethan woke up each morning forgetting just for a second. Then he remembered no coughing from the other side of the room. No soft voice calling his name. No reason to rush. The world had stopped asking him to save someone, and that terrified him more than hunger ever had. Days turned into weeks. Ethan learned new routines, washing his own clothes, cooking simple meals, sleeping alone without listening for another heartbeat. At night, he talked to the silence. "I'm still here," he whispered. "I don't know why, but I am." Sometimes he imagined his mother listening. Sometimes that hurt. Sometimes it helped. One afternoon, a familiar face knocked on the door. It was the nurse from the hospital, the one who used to sit beside him when words failed. "I was nearby," she said gently. "I wanted to check on you." Ethan nodded. She looked around the house. Too empty, too quiet. "You shouldn't be alone," she said. Ethan replied softly, "I've always been." She didn't argue, she just stayed. Through the nurse, Ethan was connected to a small community program. Not charity, Opportunity, they offered food, schooling, and a place where children didn't have to be strong all the time. On his first day back in class, Ethan sat in the last row. The letters on the board felt unfamiliar. The laughter around him felt distant. But when he opened a book, something stirred. Stories, heroes, children who survived impossible things for the first time. Ethan saw himself on the pages. Some nights, guilt crept in. If I had worked more, if I had known earlier, if I had been better. Ethan carried those thoughts quietly. One evening, he spoke them aloud. I couldn't save her forever, he said. The nurse looked at him carefully. No, she replied, but you gave her time, love, dignity. Ethan closed his eyes. Maybe that was enough. 1 year passed. On the anniversary of his mother's passing, Ethan stood by the river near their old street. He held a small piece of paper. On it, he had written one sentence: I am living. He folded it carefully and let it drift into the water. Not as a goodbye, as a promise kept years later. Ethan would return to those streets not as a child carrying scrap, but as a young man helping other children who looked like he once did, hungry, scared, invisible. He listened. He stayed. He didn't look away, because he remembered what it felt like when someone finally did. The world would never know his mother's name, or the nights he spent hungry so she could eat, or the fear he swallowed every morning just to stand up again. But that didn't matter, because love doesn't need witnesses. Ethan finally understood something his mother always knew. Saving someone doesn't mean keeping them forever. Sometimes it means loving them so deeply that you learn how to live after they're gone. Final words: he was just a child. But every day, with empty hands and a full heart, he saved his mother, and in the end she saved him too.